So welcome back to SuperCoach Edge. It is always a pleasure to have your company. And well, pre-season, it is underway, of course, as we know. And I've been trawling the internet, various social channels, trying to find the most up-to-date information when it comes to training sessions, match sims, everything else in between. Now, I found that it's been a little bit hard to find because it's been littered across various publications, the AF website, Fox Footy, Herald Sun, Code Sports, The Age, and then of course, those absolute legends out there that are attending training sessions and putting up their own little, training reports as well across social media. So given that, we figured we'd collate all the information, from the most recent training sessions, match sims, and relay it to you in one video. And this is the video. So let's kick things off with Adelaide. We'll go alphabetically. And Peatling is a name that's on everyone's minds and lips. And it turns out that he's virtually just on track to play round one. Looking through various training reports on Big Footy on the Crows forum or sub-forum. There is one guy there by the username Big Man, does some incredible work there and has listed down a couple of names here, and Peatling is definitely one of those. And I guess one thing with Peatling, as we all know, is going to add that much needed speed and foot skill to the engine room at Adelaide. There's no question marks on him at this stage. Actually has been impressing him, and Big Man did note as well that his foot skills have actually impressed him more than what he thought they would. He actually thought he'd be probably spraying, disposals left, right, and center, but has actually been pretty clean with his disposal, which is good to see, and has been impressing overall. Now, the big watch here is on Laird, who actually could be pushed back to defence with the inclusion of Peatling and the other draftee in Sid Draper coming into the side. Now, the Crows have long been, criticised for being too one-paced and slow. And, if Laird goes back to picking up off halfback, he'll definitely be a smoky, because we all know how he can score when he's off halfback. He's been scoring quite well in midfield as well, but mostly off the back of tackles and contested work. But his incredible nous to find the ball off halfback is something that I have not forgotten. So I will be looking to see if that change is made. Now, we also have Sid Draper as well. Obviously, he's going to be playing in the middle. Another guy who is one of the speediest guys coming out of the draft. And, as I said, with Big Man, the user on the Crows Big Footy forum, he noted that whilst he has actually caught the eye, one thing that he has noticed is he hasn't really been able to break tackles at training like he has at junior and SANFL level. Now, expectations are here that, that will come in time once he does adjust to the size and, speed required at senior level. So he's still a kid, got to remember that. He did impress with, his evasiveness and everything else at junior level and when he was playing in the SANFL, but we've got to temper expectations with regards to that, but is on track at this stage to be playing round one. And he is in a lot of teams at this stage and is in mine as well, as you can see there on screen if you're watching us on YouTube. Now, Dawson, another one playing, a variety of different roles across the preseason. I probably wouldn't be too worried at this stage. When it comes to players in general that have been shifted across a variety of roles, in match sims and stuff, we've got to remind ourselves that this always happens. Like the coach wants to rotate as many guys through various positions just to get some experience, into them at various roles. So Dawson is definitely one of those. He's been shifting across midfield, forward, and wing. But again, don't worry about that as yet. I guess we've got to really wait to see when the match sims and, against opposition teams and those official preseason matches to see how they line up, because more often than not, they are kind of a bit of a trial, tester to, how the team's going to line up with their best 23 heading into round one. So just keep that in mind. And then finishing off with Curtin as well, the Crows. So he's been playing as a high half forward in their recent match sims. Hasn't really been a massive standout, as noted in the match report, training reports, should say. But, he's definitely one to keep an eye on because he is quite cheap and, obviously highly rated, 158.6K. So if he can, come out firing from round one, which at this stage looks as though he will play round one with the way that he's training. But again, nothing guaranteed as yet at this stage. Let's move on to Brisbane, and this report here is courtesy of Banana Fritz. As I mentioned, like, there are training reports and match sim reports that just haven't been reported by the mainstream media, which is quite disappointing. But Banana Fritz on Twitter, fantastic work by him or her, incredible. So thank you in advance, kind sir or ma'am. So Coleman is the one we'll touch on first and foremost. Now, he remains a bit of a worry as he is still in the rehab group for the Lions. And it's reported that he didn't take part in any drills, nor did any cardio running, to the point, that he really wasn't wearing his full training kit. So it would seem that he is some ways off returning to full training, let alone being fit in time for round 0, the opening round. So I've actually taken him out of my team, as you can see here. This is a bit of a, I guess, a bit of a sneak preview of my team post the previous video, of course, where it was my team update 2.0, and I have replaced him with Josh Sin at the moment, which I'll speak about him when I go through training reports. So Coleman, a bit of a worry, so just keep an eye on that. But at this stage, it looks as though he won't be fit, unfortunately. Next up, we have Levi Ashcroft, who was also in the rehab group. Now, this comes off the back of having, minor shoulder surgery late last year, so he will be eased into full contact drills, you'd think. One, to monitor as to whether or not they, throw him straight into the contest come round 0 in the engine room, or if they ease him in via, say, a wing or, playing as a high half forward, for example. So he's definitely one to watch. I'm personally, I think he's going to be eased into things, especially considering he's coming off a bit of surgery. I mean, albeit minor. I will keep an eye on him. If he's not being played through the middle and played more off as a high half forward, I do think that that's going to, temper expectations and his scoring output. So I might look elsewhere, but as it stands, he still remains in my team at the moment. Now, in terms of the match sim, Zorko, he swung between matching up in the middle for some CBAs and his usual piggery role off half-back, and looked good. Dev Robinson and Josh Dunkley were also noted to be standouts, with Tom Doty on track to be fit for round 0. And Doty, good old Doty, interesting name. He is priced at 56.8k, so he's another option as an alternative to Coleman. Hasn't been the biggest scorer traditionally, but a little bit of a worry there. Obviously coming off an ACL himself, I think it was ACL himself. But yeah, just keeping note of him and keep watch as to how he performs across the preseason. Let's shift on to my mob in Carlton, and we'll touch on Jagger Smith first off. So he's making every post a winner as he tracks towards a round 1 debut, which I think is a lock and load. I am 100% convinced there. Now, he's got evasion, precision with ball in hand, endurance, gut running. This kid really does have it all, and stood out in match sim drills with a display of his footy smarts, also with an incredible intercept amongst congestion with 1 bit of play, all of which are traits that he displayed in his junior years. So really is impressing, and is well and truly, as I said, on track to make his debut in round 1. Cooper Lord, I spoke of him briefly as one to watch in my previous video. He's another one who stamped his authority among those in the 1st to 4th year group, and looks to have added size to his already strong frame as he looks to be a regular contributor to Carlton's contested area of their engine room. Now, I've spoken about it previously, Kennedy is going out of the side. Carroll as well was another one who's gone to St Kilda. So there are some vacancies there that have pushed Cooper Lord up the order. And I spoke of him, as I said, briefly in my previous video. And he is someone that I am very, very interested in, just with regards to, I love his contested work and his ability to translate that to SuperCoach points. Was able to average, I think it was close to 70 in the games that he played, and loves a cuddle, which is, again, ticks a big box for those sort of players that I do love to play in my SuperCoach side. So we'll keep an eye on him. And lastly, Ollie Hollins is a big, big watch, as he is one of the main candidates to step up into Newman's vacancy following his patella tendon injury. Played a few, minutes down in defence late in 2024 and looked pretty good. For me personally, I still think that Doherty will be pushed back to defence, whereas I think with Ollie Hollins might be rotated between the wing and in defence, kind of on transition. So one that I will watch across the preseason, again, more so with the official practice game that they'll play, as to how he lines up, which would be a little bit of insight into how he could line up in the season proper. Moving on to Collingwood, and this report comes via Josh Gablich, and it was on the 24th. Now, De Goey, he played limited minutes in the Pies match sim as he regains fitness following a high-grade hamstring strain that he did sustain in 2024. Nick Dacos, on that front, promisingly integrated back into training and showed no signs of his plantar fascia issue that has restricted his training load this month, but did sit out the remaining 20 minutes of the match sim as the club manages his training loads ahead of the practice matches where it is expected that he will participate. Dan Houston, another one who starred across halfback during match simulation and is one to monitor across the preseason games. No real surprise there. I mean, he's kind of taken up that mantle that, I guess Noble had to some extent, but, it means that they don't have to really rely on Quaynor as being that only sort of burst player off halfback. I think Dan Houston will complement the likes of him. I mean, Maynard can play that role to an extent as well. And yeah, I think Dan Houston could go under the radar considering that he is actually suspended. I think he's got one more game to sit out off the back of his suspension late last year for Port, but then we'll be right as rain to go in round 1. So we'll miss the opening round, but we'll be fine after that. Tom Mitchell, another one that I'll mention here, but I mean, not many people will go with him, and I'll be surprised if anyone does, but has started running in a bid to return from a bone stress issue in his foot. Probably more so something that those people that have him in their keeper leagues or in their draft leagues, is kind of relevant to them. Moving on to Essendon, and this report comes via Josh Barnes, was on the 24th, and Dylan Shield was the big surprise here because he started a new half-back role, racking up heaps of the ball and displaying his laser-like kicking as a rebounder. It just goes to show when he's got time and space, he can actually dispose of the footy quite well. Similar to, if I was going to liken it to someone, it would be Ollie Hollands from my mob. That's probably the big knock on his game as well, that when he's playing the wing or when he's asked to play in the middle, he kind of, wilts under pressure, and I guess the disposal becomes a little bit of a question mark, much like Shield. So Shield, who knows? He could be a bit of a smoky here. I don't know if I'd be keen to go on him, just because of the fact that he's at that age now, his body's breaking down. I think he played, 14, 15 games or something off the top of my head in 2024. Priced at 413.7k, and he's a mid only. So he's someone that I don't think many people will go for, but who knows if he can stay fit, and if he does keep this halfback role, could be an interesting one to watch. Speaking of halfback, Nick Martin, he's also running off halfback as he did to great effect in 2024, providing a bit of dash from defence. Saad Al-Hawley played largely on a wing in the match sim and still collected plenty of the ball for the red team, which many think is the secondary 23 compared to the grey team, which was the opposing team consisting of the best 23. So has had a relatively quiet preseason to date, and with the, competition for spots in the Essendon's defence ramping up, especially with Dylan Shield now, auditioning for a spot there, Saad does face a battle for a spot in round 1. But, I mean, impressed late last season, probably unlucky not to make his debut off the back of, the work that he put in and the form that he showed, but it was more so due to injury as to why he didn't debut. We'll like to see how he progresses across the preseason. I think he's in around about 60% of sides at the moment. So if he doesn't play in round 1, that's going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works. So I'd be trying to think at this early stage alternatives just in case. Otherwise, you could probably start him in your team, and I think he will play at some stage early on. But just one to watch. Elijah Satis, he lined up for the grey team and filled his pockets with possessions alongside Durham and Merritt. I mean, he's a little bit pricier, but we've got to keep in mind he's been in the system already. 191.2k is available as a mid. So yeah, is someone that, if he was a mid forward, I would be like, yep, no worries. But as a mid, you'd kind of, especially at that price, you'd need him to give you a guarantee that he's going to be playing in the best 23, which at this stage, I still don't know. I mean, he was playing for the grey team, which was, as I said, consisting of the best 23 if they were to line up in round 1. But yeah, I mean, big question marks about Satis with his, disposal. That's a big, big query on his game. But from recent reports, he has been working on that side of his game as well. So who knows? But it is a big, big watch on him for me anyway. And then rounding things out for Essendon, Parrish, he remains in the rehab group at the moment. And Paul Bloke, he's at that stage of his career now where he's probably more injured than he isn't. So, yeah, he's someone that, again, if you're going to pay for him, I mean, he's underpriced, 481.4K, but for good reason because of that injury history. For me, it's a big pass. Yeah, there's too many guys that have burnt me in the past that I've kind of taken a little bit of a gamble on and it hasn't paid off, that have had injury issues. Speaking of which, let's move on to Freo. And there is a guy here that we will start off with injury history that has burnt me in the past, and it is Shrek, or Hodor, as we like to call him here at SuperCoach Edge. That is Sean Darcy. So he hasn't participated in training in recent, preseason hitouts, and is actually in a race to be fit for the season opener due to ongoing treatment of the, lingering knee issue in his left knee, which has seen him in recent days travel to Qatar for treatment, further treatment that is. He hasn't re-injured it, but it's just a part of his rehab, coming back from the injury is what's being reported. What I will say is Reedy, the young ruckman for Freo, he could be one to benefit off the back of this and could be one to watch if Darcy misses the season opener and potentially the early rounds, because in the match sim, Reedy, he competed with Riddle and Jackson, who shared his time between forward and ruck. But Reedy, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Reddy. I assume it's Reedy. It's such a strange surname. Yeah, I mean, he is someone that really has put his hand up and has kind of put himself ahead of the pack, right behind Darcy and Jackson as that sort of next in line to take over if Darcy does miss. So big watch on him. The price on him is a 132.6K. I think he might have played a game last season. Let's have a quick squiz. He played a couple of games late in the season. So the last two rounds, round 23, 24, he scored a 53 and a 29, but arguably was a backup. Had 31 hitouts in his first game and 19 in the next. Only had 6 disposals and 4. So really is someone that we could use as a bit of a cash cow potentially. What was his time on ground stats? 91 and 80. So, yeah, didn't play a full game. Managed, no doubt, as a youngster, but he's someone that we should watch very, very closely. Shea Bolton, the former Tiger, he played mostly forward before switching into the middle briefly in a rotation with Matt Johnson. And lastly, Luke Ryan, he wore the no contact hat after sustaining a knock in a previous training session, which simulates, much of his role in early 2024 when he played freely without a direct opponent as that roaming marking defender. And of course, he picked it up once again in the match sim. Let's move on to Geelong and in their match sim. And I must just preface this here. Geelong haven't released any real info about their training reports. I had to scour high and low to try and get this information here, and it is very, very brief, but hopefully it's enough there to go off. And the main one was Tom Stewart, who in their match sim played almost exclusively in defence, playing off his opponent where possible. So it looks as though at this stage anyway, he's back to playing in defence and not so much through the middle as he was sort of late in 2024. Max Holmes mixed his time between the middle and the wing, where he would drift down to be that, release defensive 50 exit kick target, and something that he executed on several occasions in the match sim. And then lastly, Bailey Smith is moving well and is on track for round 1. No real other info apart from that, so apologies that it isn't too in-depth. Next up, we have Gold Coast, and this report is via Michael Whiting, and it was on the 23rd. So he kind of big noted and highlighted Connor Buderick and said that he was a star of half-back for the Suns in their match sim with clean ball use and marking. But with the arrival of Rioli and Noble, you'd have to think that he has a fair bit of competition. So I wouldn't be too hasty in trying to get him into your team. I know there was a few people last season that thought he was a bit of a bargain, started him in the teams, and had to trade him out early days. So that's kind of the big thing with Buderick. Speaking of Rioli, he continued his recovery following surgery on his medial collateral ligament, that is his knee, completing running drills, and the Suns are hopeful that he will be available for their practice match and be fully fit for opening round. And lastly, Lockie Weller, he played primarily on a wing, pushed further up the ground, especially given that Powell and Euland are among those locked into what is a stacked defensive unit for the Suns that I spoke of already. So a bit of a danger there. I wouldn't be hanging my hat on any one defender. I think in Gold Coast, in their lineup at the moment. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Let's move on to GWS. And I spoke of Geelong being, trying to squeeze blood from stone. I haven't been able to track down a training report at all from the Giants. Went on socials, went on The Age, Herald Sun, AFL, nothing. The only thing I could find was on the AFL website, where they did an article highlighting how the departure of Harry Perryman could open up a spot in defence for Connor Stone. Again, one to watch. We'll have to see if he can cement his spot in the best 23. But yeah, they kind of harped upon that. And with Connor Stone, he is a forward. Hasn't really been a big scorer traditionally, obviously playing more up forward for the Giants. But he is priced at 119.9k, so it could be a very, very nice cash cow and one to keep an eye on. Funny as well, I will note that the draft doctors, when I was trying to find notes on the Giants, the draft doctor lads on Twitter, they were having a bit of a laugh because they were having the same issues as me and couldn't find any training reports. And they used a GIF, which I, of course, enjoyed because it was Simpsons related. It was of Homer trying to squeeze juice out of an orange by pushing it into his head. So yeah, it's quite funny, which is kind of representative of trying to get information out of the Giants at this stage across the preseason. But let's move on to the Hawks, and this report comes from Josh Gabelich, and it was on the 23rd. And he noted that Nick Watson was a standout in the Hawks match sim, taking hangers, slotting goals, and setting up teammates for scoring opportunities as well. James Sicily, meanwhile, is being eased back into training after undergoing a shoulder reconstruction in October and didn't participate in the match sim, but otherwise is training well in a non-contact capacity. Will Day, he was another who dazzled onlookers, looking fit and firing after sustaining a collarbone injury in 2024, and was noted by Gabelich as Hawthorn's best performer across the preseason to date, which is I guess music to the ears of, those of us that are keen on starting Will Day. I actually, if you do peep here my team on YouTube, you can see Will Day is in my team at the moment. I have replaced Petrarca with him. I just think that Will Day, depending on how fit he is, could be a very, very big bargain. So he's in my team at the moment, and we'll track how he progresses. Interesting to note as well that just with regards to Will Day, he did switch his time between midfield and forward, but as is with match sims, as I spoke of at the top of this episode, it's too hard to read too much into positions as coaches like to mix things up. And lastly, Josh Ward was another who had himself plenty of the ball and could be a smoky to monitor as he tackles his 4th preseason. So really does fit the bill as one of those guys or one of those youngsters that is now at the stage of his career where he's had enough time in the system to really adapt to the speed of what's required at senior level, and has kind of been toing and froing up and down with his form when he has been in the senior side, but has punched out a couple of nice scores across the journey. So we'll see if he can take the step up. And he's priced at 284.5k, so very, very awkward price. And he's actually almost priced as much as Philippou, who, as we know, will be a bolter yet again. So probably a little bit too pricey, Josh Ward, but geez, if he impresses across the preseason in those official match sims and practice games, he could be someone that we potentially jump on. Next up, we have Melbourne, and the latest report I found was on the 22nd, and that was, of course, highlighting that Clary Oliver looks to be in prime shape and was prominent in the D's match sim, displaying his signature clean hands and endurance work, getting involved in multiple possession chains. So looks as though he's got his fitness back, which is good to see, and hopefully he's I guess, laser focus when it comes to footy. Draftees Langford and Lindsay, Xavier Lindsay, had lighter sessions as they are being eased into the team and managed for workloads. And likewise, Max Gawn, he sat out recovering from what is a larynx injury, whilst Petrarca was also in non-contact training following his broken rib injury, but both worked hard aerobically and joined the rehab group with some skills sessions as well. Moving on to North Melbourne, and Caleb Daniel was back to his Supercoach pig role, just snout and trough type stuff of taking kickouts for the blue team, which is a big, big tick. For the pink side, who they were opposing, Fisher and Gota played off halfback, so it looked as though the blue team was the best 23. Sheasel, he lined up forward before shifting into the midfield, but again, not too worried as it's about freeing up spots for others to have a taste through various roles. So I don't read into that too much at this stage with regards to his positioning. McKercher, he was spotted playing through the wing and across the midfield mostly and looked good. And it was the pink versus blue bibs, as I mentioned, with LDU, Wardlaw and Parker among the CBA contingent for the Blues, with Dersma given an outside role through the middle as well. And then the opposing team was Simpkin, Phillips, and Powell as the on-ballers. So the big takeaway there is, of course, Parker. Obviously at the Swans, he was able to score quite well. A big part of his game is, those players that I love, that love a cuddle, love a tackle. That kind of builds his scoring as well. At the Swans in 2024, played a bit more time up forward. Even time on ground was restricted as well. But late in the season was able to kick goals, get possessions as well, and have a bit more time through the middle. But if you look at his previous seasons where he's been playing exclusively as a midfielder, he's been able to score consistent 100-plus scores. So really like the look of Parker. And I do think, the expectation is that he probably will play through the middle a little bit more at North compared to Sydney anyway, because of the fact that North do need the experience running through the middle, protect the young guys, so on and so forth. But if he plays more time in the middle than what he does up forward, gee whiz, he could be a definite bargain. 343.6K. So, at that price point, you need to be guaranteeing that he's actually going to be playing a bit more time in the midfield, more CBAs, and, pushing his scores towards that 90 to 100 mark, which will make that price point utter value, which at the moment, it's a little bit of a worry, question mark. We don't know if he's going to play, as I said, more time in the midfield compared to up forward. But one to watch, could be someone potentially to have in your flex position as well. Just keep that in mind, because the forward line is looking pretty stacked. It's looking for pretty, stock standard. Everyone has Horn, Francis, McRae, Bailey Smith, Daniel, Lynch, Powell Pepper's another one. And then, there's Philippou as well. So, yeah, it could be a bit of a pile-on in terms of the amount of players that we're able to squeeze into our forward line. But, yeah, we could be using him as that flex, especially considering that Parker does have a mid-forward DPP swing position, which is very, very handy, especially for a flex player when it comes to trading, which we might get into at a later stage in a separate video. But let's move on to Port Adelaide, and this report comes on the 24th from Matt Turner. First off, I will mention that this is not coming out of the training session. It was with regards to, and you might have heard it already, Horn Francis. He was on SEN and mentioned that Hinkley was keen to play him more in the engine room full time, which is definitely music to our ears. And he also said that he'll likely be continuing to be swung forward when due for a rest at various stages compared to coming off the ground, which is always a good thing because it means that he's on field, and the potential for him to get some extra points is a bit of a bonus. But he did joke around saying that even though Hinkley thinks that he should be in the engine room full time, he did say that he's not sure if he's fit enough to do that as yet. But one to monitor, one to watch. But I think outside of that, he's able to pinch it in the engine room, get CBAs, and score quite well, even if he is sharing his time between the forward and the mid. So we don't really worry, but it does elevate his ceiling if he is obviously playing as a full-time mid. So like to hear that. Now, with regards to the match sims and training reports, so as I said, Matt Turner on the 24th mentioned that the draftee Joe Berry has put himself in round one calculations off the back of an impressive performance in Port's match sim, kicking 2 goals and rotating through the middle, hitting up teammates inside 50 on multiple occasions. And there was a highlight as well, which came off an eye-catching rundown tackle of an opponent that resulted in a holding the ball decision. And most notably, above all of that, was that Berry was the only draftee to be playing in the A team, which was seen as the probables for best 23. So at this stage anyway, it looks as though that Berry is lock and load almost for round one. So like to see that. Berry is obviously as a forward, and with his price point, he is priced at 140.5K. So being that higher draftee, his price is a little bit inflated. But if we get guaranteed that he's going to be playing round one, he could be a lock and load. Aside from that, Butters was at his dominant best, playing in the engine room as per usual. Former son, Lukosius, he played up forward and led well to mark and took several shots on goal, but inaccuracy did let him down. And the A's team backline consisted of Aliir, Radigalia, Logan Evans, Lockie Jones, Ryan Burton, and most notably, the dasher in Josh Sin, who has been spoken about as a potential replacement for Dan Houston. Should mention as well that Dylan Williams did play on the B team, and he's another who could be vying for that same spot in the senior side. So one to watch there. But Josh Sin, as I said earlier in this chat, he is in my team at the moment. 229.5k is a nice alternative to those of us that had Gideon Coleman in our sides. So he's one to watch at this stage. Very nice kick and can find the footy as well. So again, let's take note of him and monitor that across the pre-season. Let's move on to Richmond, and the youngster in Smiley. He remains with a rehab group at the moment, unfortunately, with Josh Gipkus also on light duties as he returns from a knee injury. And they were joined by HAWTHORN, who is also on light duties. Now, Tom Lynch, big takeaway here, and this is via the Gurus, the podcast from the Richmond forum on Big Footy. And they mentioned that Tom Lynch kicked 2 to 3 goals out of a possible 6 or 7 shots, has been involved in virtually all preseason sessions, so is looking fit and firing, which is good for those of us that have him in the forward line, as that's a bit of a playing cash cow. Now, uber cheap defender Caleb Smith, who I have in my team at the moment on the bench, he lined up off halfback and was impressive as a distributor in their match sim, and is by all reports the one who could replace Rioli, believe it or not. Could be an absolute bargain if he gets games, and this role continues, of course. Now, Tresice was another auditioning for that same role as well, which was noticed by the crew at the Richmond Big Footy podcast, and did look good as well. So again, might be a bit of an arm wrestle between these two guys as to who lines up in round one and who gets that distributor role off halfback, replacing Rioli. Now, Caleb Smith, he's priced at 121.2k, and an absolute bargain at that price if he does have a bit of a pig roll off halfback. Moving on to St Kilda, and this is courtesy of Matt Forrest again, and noted first and foremost, Philippou was very, very dominant playing through the middle in their match sim, and is set to continue his strong form and scoring output from late 2024. Travalia, the young draftee, was lined up on the wing, showing a nice turn of speed, but most promisingly of all, Jack Sinclair played off halfback, back in the role where he's most dominant. A great sign to those of us keen to start him in our starting teams, which I am definitely one of those. And it probably makes most sense with the inclusion of McRae, especially taking up a spot in the engine room. Philippou getting more CBAs as well, meaning that Sinks isn't really as relied upon to be that swingman between defence and midfield. Showmaker, he was another main distribution option out of defence in simulation drills. McRae, as I spoke of, looked great playing exclusively through the engine room, and is out to prove Bevo wrong, who constantly played him out of position, as we know. So he's going to be looking Bevo's way, saying, you know, you're going to rue the day that you got rid of me because I've still got something left in the tank. So good to see there. And then lastly, Harry Boyd, the Sandford ruckman who was signed via SSP, was a big standout here. But keep in mind, Marshall wasn't involved, so expectations should be tempered, but is a great sign nonetheless for a potential shared role between him and Marshall come round one. So I think he probably will be one of the most selected players in the game. Priced at 99.1k, bottom priced. Couldn't get any better than that as a bit of a cash cow. Let's move on to Sydney, and Callum Mills. He caught the eye lining up in the middle alongside Henry and Rowbottom as the red team, which is the best 23, opposed to McInerney, Jordan and Sheldrick. And Mills, as was noted in this report via, I think it was Code Sports, was incredibly strong around the stoppages and was super tidy by hand and foot. His contested usage was a highlight, and early indications are that he is the missing piece of the puzzle potentially for the Swans at engine room. Goulden played on the wing and displayed his usual dash and two-way running. Ben Patton, the other, recruit from the Saints, played off halfback in this main side and linked up incredibly well with his new teammates. Stood out with a piece of play as well where he ran strongly off halfback, pushing up the ground, where he received a handball from Heaney and converted on the run outside 50. Now, is in a bit of a battle for that halfback role with Ollie Florent, with the pair switching at halftime of the match sim. Caden Cleary, who's another one, played up forward in the first team and caught the eye with his tackling and forward pressure, and could be in line for an early debut and is a definite watch. Caden Cleary, let me just find his price point here, 124.1k as a forward only. So again, geez, we're having a stacked forward line here potentially as well, which isn't a good thing because, I mean, it's going to be hard to cherry pick as to who the good cash cow and rookies are, but at least we have opening round for a few of the teams to sort of work out who's got the role and who's going to perform well at senior level. Now, lastly, Sheldrick seems to be the forgotten man after bursting into the scene in 2023 with his innate ability to find the footy like Tom Mitchell 2.0. and he looked good in patches of the match sim and stood out with his decision making and field kicking as well. So it'll be interesting to see if he can work his way into the Swans side. Let's move on to the last couple of teams. The first up we have Western Bulldogs, and this report comes via Dylan Bolch via Fox Sports. And I guess the big footnote here among all this was Sam Darcy, and he was a definite standout and will look to take his game to even further heights up forward for the Dogs after an impressive display in the Dogs match sim, especially if Jamari Ugle-Hagan isn't ready to go by round 1. Darcy, he booted multiple goals in the first term and pushed up the ground to provide an aerial option. Riley Sanders, who's someone that's piqued my interest as well, looked really classy, calm and composed with the ball in hand, weaving in and out of traffic at stoppages, and was a clearance beast. Sanders as well, now his price point, a little bit awkward, 339.1k, but it is a forward mid. And if he bursts into the scene, gets more opportunity, he kind of displayed his wares early in 2024 when he was given that opportunity, but then that was taken away by Bevo. Who knows what happened there, but he can, match it with the, at senior level virtually. He has shown that in various games where he has been given, a full game, especially in the engine room. So he is someone that I'm watching very, very closely. Bond, he was Bond, looking effortlessly good. Richards, his move into the engine room will look to continue potentially into 2025, taking on again a role through the middle during the match sim. Tim English, he caught the eye, taking plenty of contested grabs whilst dominating in the ruck, whilst drifting forward to provide another attacking option. Could be a little bit of a bounce back year here for Tim English, but he burnt me across the course of 2024, so I will not be touching him. Even if I was able to draft him into someone else's team, I wouldn't put that on them. And lastly, draftee Sam Davidson will be pushing for a round 1 debut as he played across the wing and half forward and looked very, very good. The highlight, as been noted here in the match sim report, came in the second term when he went back with the flight, took a mark and wasted no time to play on and burst through a tackle before finding a teammate in open space. He has been popping up in people's teams, I have noticed. Again, another forward, 113.5k. I think he is more of a mature age type player as well. I think he's in his early 20s. So yeah, could get an early opportunity, but we'll just wait and see if he can convert that to some nice scores as well. And lastly, rounding us out is West Coast. This report comes via Nathan Schmuck, and unfortunately, it was a little bit of a smoky for people in their starting teams in 2024, and it is Elliot Yeo, but this time around, he is continuing his battle with injury, having been sent for scans on a knee and an ankle after being forced out of match simulation due to awkwardly landing in a tackle. So yeah, looks like he will have a delayed start to the season, potentially. Liam Ryan, he was noted as a standout, playing higher up the ground, whilst Jack Graham was influential in the midfield. Another ex-Tiger in Liam Baker, he lined up off half-back and could be one to keep an eye on if he takes more of a distributor-type role. And speaking of which, Ruben Jinby, he looked to continue his role off half-back as well, that he impressed in late in 2024. Now, Matt Flynn, contrary to reports that he is injured, he's fit and firing. With a reported injury that he sustained and was reported on in a previous training session a couple of weeks ago, wasn't an injury at all. He actually just went off, received strapping, and returned to play, so he's fine. Elijah Hewitt, as an experienced cash cow, that could be making us some huge cash in 2025. He took huge strides, impressing as a high half forward with his speed and dynamic movement in their match sim. So is on track to be in for a big year, hopefully, for him and for those of us in SuperCoach. Well, that's it, ladies and gents. That is the, rundown of all things training sessions, match sims in recent days. And hopefully that helps you construct your team, gives you something to go off and, adjust things on the fly. But as I said, we will keep our ears to the ground, our snout to the ground, and like a bit of a bloodhound. And we will be sniffing out as much info as we can, and hopefully put together another one of these videos, which did take a bit of time. I will admit it took me about 2 hours to go through, trawling the internet, various websites, going through paywalls, all that sort of stuff to find this information. So hopefully it does come in handy. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you are enjoying our content, if you're new to the channel, feel free to show your support. And the best way to do so is via subscribing. So thank you in advance. And it's an easy way to keep up to date with all the info and videos as they drop on our channel. Any comments, questions, leave them down below in YouTube here if you are watching us, or you can hit us up alternatively on Twitter at supercoach_edge. You can find myself at DamoJ88, and you can find Liam at LiamEvans_95. Hopefully I nailed that handle, because if not, I'm not going to hear the end of it. But that's it, ladies and gents. Thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.